Welcome to Unbiased and On the Fence. I'm Shane. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. What's up, Michelle?
Hey, bro. Still here.
Still here, and we got our energy stuff handled or whatever. We had some wiring issues there, but we're all good to go.
Yeah. Oh, I thought you meant the Ascension process.
Right, I was thinking, it's so funny the parallels, right?
I was like, got it handled. That's
we had to
hilarious.
do some 3D energy work, you guys. Get the cords plugged in. That's funny.
Who's got what handled?
Right. So, yeah, that leads us to... Let me start off with my little psychic story that I was telling you about, because I had a joke. Normally, sometimes you'll, figure out a punchline to a joke, but the other day, my wife and daughter, I was taking them to school and work, and my wife's like, "Oh, did you hear the joke about Michael Jackson?" And I thought about it, and then all of a sudden, the whole joke popped in my head. And I said, "Oh, that his pronouns are he." And she's like, "How did you know? Did you already hear it?" And I'm like, "No, it just popped in my head, the whole joke. I wasn't thinking anything about pronouns or anything like that, But I got the whole entire joke clear as a day, How do you explain that? That's just so weird.
I think it's the telepathy.
Yeah.
I think you just heard it in her head, because I know for Mom and I, because it is your wife, you're living together, you sleep in the same bed, you don't realize probably how much stuff you're picking up from her thoughts,
Yeah, that's so crazy.
Yeah. Mom and I is always really easy. I know when she's decided what she wants to eat for dinner.
Mm-hmm.
I get a picture of it in my head, little things. But the telepathy is really picking up a lot. And so much so, how much we're actually sharing common experiences too, processing the same kind of thoughts and not realizing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like those trends going through the collective consciousness, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Keywords, I find come up, and it amazes me when I hear them, I'll hear it from you, and you say the exact same phrase, and it's like the tone of that phrase and the emphasis behind it kind of thing. And even though it may be used in a different context, it happened in a slightly different way or a slightly different process, the underlying oomph of it
right.
is there, whether it's you, or Travis or Mom, that I'm really my keys to kind of checking in on this process and getting those affirmations. And it just blows my mind.
Speaking of keywords, Lark said, question in reference to timelines merging into a bottleneck. What are your thoughts on this?
And I just laughed, and I say, bottleneck. There it is. Keyword. Bottleneck. I don't know, Lark, right? But how many times have I mentioned bottleneck to you before? We've talked about it on this show.
Idea of, the convergence.
And I do think that's a great reference. I think bottlenecking and what goes on with that.
Energetically, too, is usually in the
is an energetic. There's an energetic bottlenecking. So when we get hit, it's like you, the bottle, right?
Right.
And so when that happens, I'd like to say, often we can, there can be more head pressure, headaches, twitching, face twitching, shoulders, neck, stiffness, pain, and then, down in behind the ribs, difficulty with your wings, these guys here,
right.
So it can really crunch as it goes through the bottleneck. So I love that he used that term. And, I think that's a great example how you can take that bottleneck term, and use it to define and apply what's going on with the timelines right now and see that. But you can also apply it to what's going on when that happens to us. The bottlenecking within ourselves is always the way.
Right. And how could this possibly connect to The Price is Right is my big question. So do you guys remember when Bob Barker died a few years ago? I'll have to tell you that no, you don't, because he's alive.
Yeah. That one really got me this week. Like I sent Sheen a random, and I don't usually do this. He's just like, hey bro, what's going on? And I was just like, Bob Barker.
Like, Bob Barker's alive.
Like, you must have laughed a little bit when you got that one. I was, I was like, what is going on? But I was in such shock at the time, but I realized afterwards, like, oh, you probably already know,
no, I didn't know about that one, but I did remember him dying, and it was like, wow, it's like, that's just so trippy when that happens. You can never get so used to it that it doesn't sort of like, it's cool.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that stays pretty cool.
Some of them are like, I think I might, remember it another way. Like, sometimes it comes mushy with dual memories, or you're not sure. And, sometimes you just don't know the material well enough to be sure, whatever the change is. But when you hear one that's like, for you personally, like pretty definitive.
Right. Like, you were discussing an interview where somebody was talking about Bob Barker after he passed.
Yeah, Adam Sandler.
Adam Sandler, that's right.
Yeah, because he was in Happy Gilmore.
Right.
And I remember how sad Adam Sandler was about Bob Barker.
So where's that clip? You know what I mean? It's like, does it exist in a different way now?
Yeah, but I also remember, because he was on The Price is Right for so long. Like, I grew up with him on that. And that when he left the show, and he died within, like a couple years of leaving the show. And, I remember thinking it's just like an old married couple. Like, he was married to the show for a long time. And usually when one spouse dies, the other one goes within the odds of them going within the 2-year time period are pretty high. And I remember thinking about that as well. The fact that he was married to the show for how long that he was on it. And that, when he left, I know he left for health issues, right? I think, but yeah, it was kind of, remember thinking that too. Yeah, but apparently he's fine. He's 99 now. So good for you, Bob Barker. I'm really happy to see you again. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, good for you. Guess you made the cut.
Right.
Or in this timeline, maybe tomorrow, I'll wake up and pop in another one. Who knows? Maybe it just speeds up, eh?
Yeah.
Because some people, like we were saying, you're saying they go back. Like, who are you saying has popped up dead and alive a number of times now? Billy
Graham is another one. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, Billy Graham's funeral again? But I don't know. Is he alive now? I don't know if he's back alive or not.
I don't know. Yeah.
2 or 3 times. So, but that kind of back to the bottlenecking thing. That's like, if you can think of there being all these possibilities, and there still remains possibilities that he survived, and that crunches or merges into this, or bottlenecks into this current reality, And I think a lot of our experiences are that way. That's why we have these memories that don't fit our life, because maybe like that condo that I remember is another choice I made to move into this condo. And now I've got like these memories of this life, just the choices I made if I had gone that way, sort of, as we become more and more of our higher self, you would think that these other choices that we could have made, at least the experience of them can kind of culminate into your single experience. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I was explaining to you before too, the way I see it, and I'm not saying that I'm right. I'm just saying this is the way I see it. Is like, we hit these node points, like sort of, we have predestined markers, and I kind of see, like, in between these node points, the multidimensionality, you can just go off in a variety of different ways, branch off this way, but that we do kind of come back around or join back around, especially like with what's going on right now, like more than any other time, I think. But, I think it's been a more subtle thing, right. Previously, where we kind of had markers, where you meet a certain people, or you do a certain job or a certain place, you move to a certain place. And, it's kind of goes with that, like, you're always meant to be there sort of feeling. And those situations, like how easily they just kind of pop into existence, and the doors open. And, also for me, because I would get precognitive dreams, I would dream about specific events. So that's kind of how I started to get an understanding of these node points, because I would find like on approaching node points, the precog dreams would really pick up at that point. So yeah, that's kind of my view on it. But I think what's going on now is even way more different. Like instead of us all having all these different node points, I think actually we all have like conjoined node points. It's like as the split goes, it's like our individual node points are all getting unified to either polarity, right? For the split. So we're all kind of moving together towards that. And as that happens, because of the collective experience, so many of us are doing this. This is this massive compression. Like, so it's like shutting down and compressing these timelines like en masse, as opposed to us doing it much more individually at a slower pace. It's like, yeah, that's kind of how I see it.
We're trucking. Things are happening.
We're trucking. Yeah, yeah. So it's really adds to it. So there's another key word is compression, in a feeling of compression. And if you're experiencing sort of highlighted memory review, life review reels, right now, I find what I'm hearing goes along with it is a experience of compression, and this time that we've spent, or maybe even reviewing someone else's life. There's something different in the review in that it feels compressed. Yeah.
The other thing that we were talking about earlier that I wanted to bring up is like, because we've often talked about like some of the nostalgic feelings or the deja vu feelings, but some of the more natural feelings of like, I don't know, just cringy things you've done in your past that just come out of nowhere, and then you're so embarrassed about it, or you know, cringing like, oh, I can't believe I did that, and, you know, and you can physically see it on your face and your body movement, right? And you were mentioning like it happened like you're like right about to fall asleep, right? And then this old memory comes up that you cringe about or whatever, and it's like you physically move and turn away from it, like, right? Like, what are you turning away from?
You're turning away from yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about. Well, that's what's really been going on, you know, because it can be worse at night when you're trying to still your mind and go to sleep, when these energies, like the sun was just popping off, you know, over the last week or so. And I really feel like what happens is it pushes up all this you know, anything that we had this negative perception to, but actually there's a whole other element now, which is viewing it like a life review from multiple perspectives. So what's going on now is like, you know, maybe that memory, you know, there's a memory that you felt shame about, but now it might be like something that I thought I did the right way at the time. Yeah. I thought I did the good way at the time. Yeah. Having a multi perspective experience on it. So suddenly you may be getting caught off guard by perceiving and experience what the opposing perspective of that from another person may have actually been, and seeing it in a different light. And that one thing you thought you were just so great about is like, ooh.
Right. So that's sort of, and it's like being in that life review thing, like in the now.
That's
moment.
Right.
But like, even like, you know, maybe a conversation I had with a stranger or someone I don't know very well, maybe earlier in the day, and then like you kind of go over it and you're like, oh my God, they totally took it this way, right? And I wasn't thinking that at the time, and you're like, oh my God, that seems so rude or whatever, and it just pops in your head, and it is sort of like for a moment you were shown, like, look, that's how they actually took that, and you're like, no, I didn't mean for it to get taken that way, and then, you know, a lot of times you can't fix it because it's like, you know, someone you're not going to ever see again. But you still like, and that makes it worse because you feel like you want to fix it or like explain yourself. And like, no, please don't think I meant it that way or whatever, you know what I mean? But it can just be little things, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I like that you said, so you brought up one thing that Mom and I have talked about too, is this feeling of like, of like wanting to go back and fix it. And it has a feeling like this recognition, like you wrote the final exam.
Yeah.
You know, like it was your last chance to write this final exam, and you've handed it in, and now you've realized like, like you made a whole bunch of stupid mistakes, like stuff like you shouldn't, like you put the wrong multiple choice in by accident because you're reading the wrong question at the wrong time. You like, that answer should have gone here, or you forgot to even fill out that page and you like can't go back.
Right.
It's done. It's handed, like it's like, yep, that's it. And you're like, but oh.
But just like the things of the past we cringe about, the further back we go, it's like, man, was that even me? I was a completely different person there. How was I so blind, right? So it's like you realize those things are what made us who we are today. So if you took them away, you'd be that person that didn't learn, right? So
I know, but when you're like, it is a process, eh? But when you're getting like I love my mom's term, like browbeat. When you're getting browbeat with this, because it's like a high velocity slideshow at times, purging up all this stuff. It's like, and it's hard, but you have to, once you start elevating that view and realizing it from all perspectives, that we have been all things. We have been the angel and the devil for everyone, including, for myself. And that's kind of what we're supposed to do. Because when you look at the story and the construction of the story and the protagonist's journey, it's the antagonist that propels him forward, through friction. And I think, sometimes we are called to be that for people. So is it really a mistake? And it really comes to understanding that we are all things and that we play all roles. And it comes to acceptance of our humanity, that we are here having a human experience. And when we can accept the part of that is human, that is not acting as in perfection, it is acting as a messy human does, that acceptance of ourselves leads to acceptance of others. And that we are all things. We are all, we aren't just the perception we have of ourselves. You've got all these different people that you encounter in your life, it perceive you in completely different ways, right. In completely different roles, right? As father, as husband, as friend, absolutely. Right? As, coworker or boss or whatever, and whatever preconceived, ideas they have that go along with that expectation of the role you're filling. And it's just acceptance of like being all of those things and kind of coming to that place.
Yeah, and that is part of being, I guess, empathetic, or, seeing from the other person's point of view, that perspective, because as we sort of die to our ego and our personality, we realize like who we really are underneath it, but you can never show that to the world, really, like not completely. It's like the world is seeing an icon of who we are, whether it's like you were saying, like the dad or the husband or the whatever job you have, the banker or whatever it is,
Right.
Right. And you kind of just kind of got that icon on, and people, draw assumptions from that. But then you realize like no one can ever completely know who you are. You only kind of exist in the way people see you, And
how they perceive you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is an illusion.
It's crazy, isn't it?
It is crazy.
It's mind-boggling.
It is crazy. Like when you really take that in, it really does you are all things. You are all things to all people, and that's okay. That's what you're supposed to be. I'm not supposed to be perfect, right? How
we all
boring.
We all got to play the bad guy sometimes.
We all got to play.
And it's usually not till after the fact that we're like, "Ooh, I was clearly the bad guy that time." You know what I mean? Or whatever. I felt so right at the time. I remember that being an epiphany growing up. It's like you always assume like the good guys know they're the good guys and the bad guys know they're the bad guys. But like when it comes to war, everybody thinks the other guy's a bad guy, And I didn't realize that as a kid.
Yeah. It's like I said to you, like Archangel Michael holding the sword, right? The Buddha heart in the demon hand. There is a time for ferocity, and it's having the Buddha heart to know, and like the higher perspective to know what to apply where, what part of yourself you are choosing to apply most efficiently in each situation. And sometimes that is the demon. sometimes that is the beast, right?
Yeah, or the lion heart.
Yeah. Good series I'm watching right now that sort of goes over this concept is Penny Dreadful, if any of you have seen it. So, or
is it a remake
get
of
your hands
something?
on it. No, it's quite original. Well, I mean, it's remaking an effect that is taking a bunch of old monsters like Frankenstein and vampires and different things and sort of putting them in a collective story together. But there's some very deep discussions in it about the monsters that exist within ourselves, coming to terms with that we all have those sides, and the questions of what we are born here to do. Are we born to suffer, or, you know, it's quite an array of the human perspective, and sort of this process, I think, of understanding ourselves and accepting ourselves,
And like
and
Mom
polarity,
says here,
light and
we are
darkness.
learning to embrace our duality. Thank you,
That's
Catherine.
right. That's right. Yes.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
That we are part of it.
that's like why we see a lot of within religion, people not realizing that or pushing that off. That's not part of me. That's the devil, right? Or you know what I'm saying? And when you pass the buck, you don't own it, then that leads to all sorts of things. Because you do anything with this free pass, just put it off on, it was the devil.
I think it
clearly,
weakens
right?
you.
Yeah, it
It
does.
weakens you.
Right.
It really
The whole
does.
system's kind of designed that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it can definitely be a stepping stone for people to get beyond the unforgiveness they might have towards some of their past actions, like we're talking about, because I'm sure people have really cringy things, right?
We all do.
Right. So it's like to move beyond that, sometimes religion can be a stepping stone, but at some point, you have to sort of realize, like, oh, I need to own this, right? I need to take up my cross daily. It's all there. It's just not delivered that way. It's delivered in a way that we're sort of, I don't know. We need the system, right? We don't need the system. The system is like, it's like an ice tray to water in God's water in the ocean, and it's like how can you stick an ocean into ice trays and compartmentalize it and limit it by so much, right? The most unlimiting thing there is God, right? So how can you possibly stick it into some ice trays and say, here it is. This is
and that's where we're limiting ourselves. If we're only willing to explore our light, right? I mean, we are calling in, we're making room within our vessels to bring in more light, that, and we are removing the darkness that does not serve us. But at the same time, I think that we all have, like, within our monad, within our archetype, aspects of ourselves that are not to be removed. For me, there's a strong connection to the wolf, obviously, and wolf energy.
Right.
And it's a part of who I am, right? You've got to have the courage to explore the darkness and really go through the muck. And you do have to throw a lot out, but you also have to be able to recognize the parts that are truly you, too. And then when you do that, I think that really allows you the power to choose their application, because you're clarified within yourself of their, like, location, where it is, like, where to find it within yourself, like,
One of the secrets for me, for perspective reasons, to help me, like, kind of grasp this idea, is to figure out where is the dividing line between me and this other person that did something that I would never do, right? And it's like you start to think, well, if I was born in the same family, was taught the same things, had the same DNA, at some point you're going to cross over that line of where you're like, oh, I would have done exactly what he did or they did or whatever, right? And it's like, so what makes them different,
Yeah.
And it's like, would you have been different with just those parents and your own personality? Would you have been shaped and indoctrinated as they were by whatever, you know what I'm saying? And it's like, at some point, you start realizing, you're like, oh, wow, if it's something horrific, you can think, I'm lucky I wasn't put in that situation, because I probably would have done the same thing, right?
Yeah.
And it makes it easier to forgive people. Yeah.
I learned to stop saying I would never do something.
Right. Universe has a way of proving
Because
you wrong with that. Right.
guaranteed, at some point I would find myself in that position, and maybe not even realize it at the time, right? It's not till you like actually get out, and then it's like, ooh,
right.
You know, I did that behavior, or like whatever it was, right? Oh, I would never do that, or I would never be that way, or I would never. Oh, you probably actually already have, and you're just not acknowledging it. But you know, if you're so adamant about it, it's like the universe likes to step in and goes, "Oh, you really think you wouldn't? You sure about that?"
Right.
Yeah. Well,
For a
okay.
lot of times, it's like just a memory is brought back to me. So if somebody cuts me
Mm.
off in traffic, I'm like, yeah, it's kind of like the way you cut that guy off the other day on
Yeah,
accident
yeah,
when you
isn't
weren't
it?
paying attention or whatever. You know, you're like, yeah, I did that. You know,
Yeah.
and then you just have to
Well, we're
laugh at
lucky.
yourself. You know,
You're lucky when you get it that way.
right?
When they're just able to, you know, pull out that memory card and say, "Remember
right.
when?"
Right.
I love it when they do that. I always get. That's one of my big ones where I know I'm getting information. Is it starts with "Remember when?"
Yeah, I found myself
And out
like,
comes the cards. Out comes the cards.
yeah,
Remember when this? Remember when that? It's not always a good thing. It's just how they introduce information.
but you
Yeah.
realize it in the moment. You're like, sorry, my turn to be the jerk. I didn't mean to. You know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 Yeah. It's okay. You know, I think that's where Mom and I were talking about this yesterday after just going through so much of this, the dark, heavy things, and releasing it and sort of getting to that higher perspective, or, you know, realizing the multidimensional possibilities of everything. So judging choices and whether they're good or bad, literally how ridiculous it is. You know, and I mentioned too, like the couple BQH sessions that we've done together. I think it's happened a couple times where, like, near the end of it, and I'm like really deep, I go into this hysterical laughing fit.
Right.
Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't know what the joke is, but I know it's in reference to whatever is going on here. And it's the funniest joke I've ever heard in my life, right, Shane?
Yeah.
Like just howling, just laughing so hard. And it's whatever this is. It's just the silliness of it all. And what is how serious we take it, and how serious we take ourselves,
Yeah.
you know, and our identity and all this, and how serious we are about that. And I think that's really a big part of the humor to it all, that it is silly.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Which is what I liked. I don't know if, you know, I mentioned to you Everything Everywhere All at Once, the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they really kind of captured the absurdity of it all, the silliness of
Right.
it. Yeah, was one thing they did. I like that they put that in there. It's absurd. It's absurd how seriously we take ourselves.
Right.
And that's what I think they were trying to show. The Koreans actually have a wonderful, I watch quite a bit of Korean content, and they have the wonderful ability to laugh at their own seriousness. You know, and I do find it slightly different than, you know, watching the Chinese or Japanese sort of films and entries. They're much more serious. These guys, they'll be serious, but they're laughing at themselves while they do it.
Right.
And they're wonderful, wonderful.
Well, that's
content.
one of the things about, like, you know, when we take on points of view, if we hold on too tightly to points of view, they become part of how we identify ourselves, right?
Right.
So maybe it's a religion or something, right? You classify under that label, right? So
Yeah.
then anybody who says anything about that now is actually attacking you personally. So all of
Yes.
these things that you know, we're going through this ego death, but it's like
That's it.
before you can even get to the ego, you've got all these outfits on top of it that you've got to learn to peel off, because none of that is who we are. You know,
Yeah.
and that's really when we feel like we're being attacked and we feel like we have to defend that, you know.
Yeah.
So it's almost like it's better to have that just open-minded view of everything,
Yeah.
and not to get offended and take things so personally. And that's part of the
I know.
seriousness of it, you know. So it's like,
I don't envy anybody with a pronoun right now, because they've got a long, long road ahead of them. Like, I really have pity, because that's they're way on the other. They're doubling down. I mean, we talked about that. Geez, before I even moved out here, I remember talking about the identity boxes
Right.
you know, and how they really want you to take a smaller and smaller and smaller identity box,
Right. That's why
and be
there's
like,
more and more
this is
groups and
yours. Yeah,
subdivisions
you,
instead of it.
yeah, and you guard this with your life, you know,
Right.
like, and yeah, how the trick that is, you
Right.
know, they've got you so wrapped up in print, um, you know, and in the identities too, they divide. You know, the more definitions you want to apply, the more, you know, it's just more division. It's just
Right.
more separation, right? We'll divide you into a smaller identity group, smaller identity group, smaller
So you
identity
feel
group.
more and more
So you have less
isolated
and less people. Yes.
under the guise of being more and more open. So it's like it's this
Yes, and
complete
tolerant.
trick. You know what I mean? It's like we
It's
should
such
be
a
moving
con.
in the direction that people are people, right? And we're making less
Yes.
and less distinctions, but instead
Yes.
it's like no, we need more labels. The ego is like
Yeah.
just scratching and crawling, clawing to hang on
Yeah.
to
As they're
the ego.
screaming in rage at you about tolerance. You
Right.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And
it's
they don't even see it. Like
it's
they
a
don't even.
corruption of a beautiful thing that's happening with, and you'll
Mm.
see that it's like people, as soon as something's moving to more towards freedom, somebody tries to step in and corrupt it in a way to move it towards under the same guise of more freedom, more
Yeah.
division, more subdivision, and more reasons to argue and fight over things. You know what I mean? Because it's
Yeah.
like they're just creating things to divide over now. And it's all
Yeah.
attached to the
But
ego.
who's creating it, really?
We
Like,
are,
I feel like,
really.
well,
We're
no,
doing
I
it to
feel like it's just
ourselves.
part of this process. Like
Yeah,
the it's time for the oil and water to separate.
yeah,
It's part of the split and part of this process. So the polarities are becoming more heightened, you know, those um doubling down on the ego identity, and those you know, allowing for the death of the ego, which is a scary thing. It's like jumping into the void,
right.
you
And
know.
you were talking about that earlier. We can kind of change the words a little bit, for
Mm.
instead of using the S word, we can use maybe self harm or exiting the
Yes,
matrix or something like that. But you were
that right.
explaining how those
Yeah.
energies of an adolescent sort of
Mm.
having to die to their younger childlike self to be more adult or whatever. I'll let you take it.
Right. So
And confusing that.
There's certain points in life where, you know, and one of the major ones being, yeah, childhood to adulthood, and the idea that, you know, as teenagers, that rate of leaving, right, is very high, because they misconstrue the feelings they have, um, metaphorical,
Right.
feelings of death, right,
Right.
as literal,
Mm-hmm.
and that it's actually a very normal process,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it occurred to me, because the other analogy that or metaphor that we often use for this process is labor, right? Especially
Mm-hmm.
what we've been going through right now, and that the other really big stage where that happens is motherhood. And like, it's even more sudden than you know, the teenagers, which is you've got a bit of a progression there, right?
Yeah.
But literally, when that first child comes out, it's like everything has changed. You are no longer the person you were before. So, you know, I think a lot of the depression, I know there's hormones and such, right? But really, I think a lot of it actually has to do with the death of who you previously were. You will no longer be that person again from that day forward. You know, your life has irrevocably changed.
Right.
So
that's funny that you're bringing this up because my wife was just telling me about our first child. Now it's been 28 years, but she was talking about how she went through this phase of feeling so close while the baby was in her belly that it didn't even feel like the same baby once it came out, and feeling clingy to it, not really wanting people to hold the baby or anything, and then at the same time feeling like she lost something at the same time because it wasn't in her body anymore. It was like part of her, and it was just like a disconnect with that whole thing. So that, and it wasn't like that with any other children, but like there's this paradigm shift that a woman goes
that's what
through.
it is.
And
she's thinking it's the baby, but it's
or that
the
she lost
state,
something, but
the
she
being.
didn't. Right.
She did. She lost her
pregnancy,
who she was before being a mother. No, not, you know, just a single person. Like your identity as who you are, literally. Right. It changes so drastically with motherhood, because from that point on, you are like 100% responsible for this other being. Like everything changes. Right. Your priorities, like what you think about, like what you
and
can do,
and you don't even know how
anything.
to expect
Deal
it.
with
You
it.
don't know what it's going to be
Yeah.
like. You can't really
No.
know until you're in
No.
it.
Yeah.
It's like one
And
of
then you're
those
just in
things.
it and you're like, why do I feel like I just lost something? Because you lost everything you were before,
Right. Or it
Right.
feels that
So,
way for sure. Yeah.
yeah,
And then you
yeah, yeah.
focus on that, and then all of a sudden you feel like what makes you you is gone, but that's sort of
Yeah. And
getting
then you're
caught up in the
struggling to find
thoughts.
yourself again, often as a mother for years afterwards, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So
Because your
that's kind of
identity is so tied
happening.
to your children.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, so
Collectively.
that is happening right now. Like, I think I did want to bring it up just to say, hey, it's normal to, because I've noticed some of these thoughts come in and it's almost like, what, who, like, who's talking? Like, I'm not doing that, right? um but it's the ego, it goes along with all of that. So, if you've had any extra kind of weird little thoughts regarding exiting, there's nothing wrong with you. It's
Sometimes it's
okay.
in the collective because I don't feel
It's in
that
the
way at
collective.
all,
Well,
but I'll
because
feel it in the.
collectively,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I think that's what it is. I think it's just really going around because as there's so many ego deaths,
Hmm.
symbolically, like as a metaphor, that's what we're experiencing. So, because we want to get past this, right? When you're in it, it's dark and it's heavy. It's like,
Right. And you take
you
it on as your
just don't
own
want to.
because it makes
Mm-hmm.
a huge difference if you know you don't feel depressed at all and you feel this wave of depression come on. It's easy to say, oh well, that's clearly not me. I'm just picking up on something in the collective right now.
Right.
But if you're
Right.
feeling a little bit depressed anyway and then that comes on, it feels like your depression because it's hard to distinguish
Yeah.
between the two. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
so
Well, that's why I want to bring it up, because if it's going kind of like in conjunction with any of these other experiences,
mhm.
of the memory and the rehashing and how you feel and feeling different perspectives, or feeling like I said, like you don't want to play the game anymore because I don't even know the rules. So
Right.
until you guys tell me the rule, like, all of
Right.
these different things, like,
Right, yeah.
you know, it's okay. Like, I think a lot of people are really feeling like that. And it really is just this kind of death to the ego and moving into a different stage of like how we function in reality. And that's a big deal. It's a really big thing. And it's not an easy thing. And it's not done in one day, and, we think, okay, well, I worked through that trauma experience, or um, it's it cycles back. It does.
Oh
Might get a
yeah.
little easier, but we'll move on to other things. And I just find it really gets hectic at these times with this amount of energy comes in. It just really likes to shake all that old stuff that needs to be released, and it all comes to the surface in here. And the mind is going, the ego mind is going, what do we do with this? Well, we need to solve it the way we used to solve it. And there's a lot of panic about that, right?
Mhm.
So, yeah, just going back to practice, that's all you can do, and just allow it to go through you. And mm-hmm. You're not
Awesome.
the only one.
Let's see. Catherine Hutton, Mom
That's
says, I'm
Mom.
not
Hey,
going
happy
to exit
birthday to
early
Mom.
because I am too stubborn to see how this life story of mine ends.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
feel you
There's
there.
Mom. Mm-hmm.
And plus, there's always that thought, at least for me, there was at times when I was like really depressed or whatever. I thought, man, the last thing I want to do is like go back to go. You know what I mean? Like start over again, back to, you know what I'm saying? And like,
Yeah.
no.
Well, especially when you're like not even like, that's exactly it. Start out, because I feel like that. Like, so 50 years, and it's like boom, and everything about my life, it's like it's gone.
Right.
Like, and it's like here I am, but it's like to
But
move
it's really not,
forward. Yeah, to move forward, I want more information before I make decisions. I feel like, yeah.
You see that there. So let's talk about dreams because,
Mm, yeah.
there was a few. You had like a couple of third eye ones. You want to talk about them? Because
Well, I
you
do
never
think,
told me about it.
yeah, well, I do think, over the last couple of months, we've portal is another key word. And I think there's a lot of portals opening up, and literally portals within ourselves, which I do believe are located in here. And that, if you have been experiencing more pain in this area, in the shoulder blade area, I think it has to do with that. So I think, our ability to transfer through realities or dimensions, portaling, is really increasing. So it definitely ties in with all of us. It's everything connected. But so what do I want to say about, so the dreams? So I do feel like people may be experiencing it two ways. You may be feeling like you got attacked possibly in dream, or bullied, threatened. It's a bully character. The character right now that is out and about is, I think, a representation of really all that kind of the dark side has left. Was just kind of a thug that only uses intimidation. Tries to back you in a corner and tries to get you to say certain things or behave in a certain way. But it's really not working, So it's it seems like that kind of energy that I
But to
don't.
trigger like a fight or flight sort of response, right? Is what you're saying? Like a
Yeah,
fearful
well, so that's the
test.
other thing that's going on, which is like the litmus test, I call it, um, which I feel, goes around and periodically tests our fear response, because your reaction to fear and your management of it is a really important part of this process as we increase our manifestation abilities. You don't want to manifest nightmares, right? Um, so, yeah. So addressing the fear. So it's a bit of a litmus test on how fight or flight and how you respond to stressful situations or fearful situations. But this bully yeah, has come up a few times too, in a few different ways. Um, so
Was
I'll
that the
tell you.
one with
Well,
the third eye, too, getting scratched?
Well,
Or?
both of them, yeah, not just mine. The bullies being in other people's dreams. Travis describes them as kind of like a bouncer type of character that likes to kind of want to back you in a corner and get you to say things that you don't want to say. Um, I'm trying to remember what mom's experience was. Just thugs, bullies.
Well, when we
There's
were
no
talking
real.
about that earlier, all the different voices you have, that some are kind, some are mean, and,
Mm-hmm,
and like we can act or not act on the things we think of, and we can be the observer and all that good stuff. But it's like,
mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, it's recognizing that that is all part of us, that sort of, even those thoughts, you know what I mean? And it's like getting to a point where it's like you realize like all these people are in the car with these different feelings, but who's in the driver's seat? Who's actually driving? You letting the angry, evil, mean guy
That's
drive, right?
right. That's
But we
right.
do, we
Right.
all have them there.
Take
We want
control
to
of the
stick them in the
situation.
trunk, right, or something. But
Right.
you know,
Right. I think that's a good representation as far as this sort of this test or this checking in through dream state of like, who's driving the car? Who are you letting drive the car? And sort of providing you with opportunities to play that out and see who's driving, right? So for me, the first one I had was, I was viewing somebody being attacked. It was like a bully thug situation, and he was on top of someone, another man, and he was gonna like cut something into his forehead, right? But then, like, I was observing this was all very, very quick, and then suddenly I was in that position, and he's sitting on top of me, and I could literally feel the sharp object scratch in my forehead, right in my center forehead. And my reaction was just so immediate. Um i um what it what I do in dreams is, the best way to describe it is I pull all of my energy into myself, like this, and into the core, and then I blast it out, and it will erode everything. I'm not in fear or anything. It's just like unleashed power. Um, and so, but it really surprised me this time, because it's like, it was instantaneous, like how fast it happened. And I had a sudden flash of this like shocked look on his face. as he was literally like blown away, like felt like out of a portal, like just blown right out. And it was just all gone. So I had that. I thought it was interesting because it was, being located right on the third eye, like this spot, and feeling the physical sharpness of it. So, I do question that. I'm just
That's
saying
a
I know
weird one. It's
definitive.
like he's trying to put out your third eye or something.
I felt like, okay, so this is what it felt like. It felt like he was trying to write something on my forehead that actually applied to him, like the word coward or something. It felt like, the type of person, like they want to mark you with that which they are. That's what it felt like. And yeah, he was just a weasel, like it was a bully, and that's what they do, and it was like humiliation, like he was trying to humiliate. And it was like, I don't even know that he realized it was me. Like he was doing it to this other man. And then suddenly I was in that position, and then bam, right? Like as soon as I felt this, I was like, no, 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 you're not. And then whew, like it did really what surprised me this time. Not that I felt it, because I felt things before in dreams, but actually how fast and how much stronger the power of this was. That almost surprised myself. So, but the next situation, so a couple weeks later, I had another dream again where I felt physically in this exact same location and felt it within the dream. And I was walking down the street at nighttime. It was winter, and I was by myself, and a car went by, darkened windows, rolled down, bunch of thugs in the car, and they start like shouting, threats and obscenities, and we're going to get you, or whatever, as they're like driving by. Right. And of course, being a woman by myself, walking alone, at night. And it's like, you keep an eye on them, right? To be wary. And, I continue walking along, and I come up to this, one like a really old Victorian style house that had been turned into a restaurant, like a fine dining restaurant. And here's this car pulled into the parking lot, and 4 younger guys in their early 20s, jocks with a bad attitude, right? Bully types. But also the kind, like I got the impression, like you don't know what they're capable of when they're in a group. They're like a bunch of wild dogs. Like they are weak and they are useless, but when together, they're capable of any kind of depravity. So to beware, right? And so I'm walking by, and they started throwing snowballs at me. And the one snowball hit me directly in the forehead right here, and I actually felt it. So then I was like going to deal with it, right? And I walked up to them and I approached them, and I was like, well, like, what's your problem? Like, what are you doing, kind of thing. Anyways, I got the real sense from them, again, it's kind of going on my head, that they were trying to provoke me so that they could like video like a Karen. You know what I mean? They're doing something, and try to act like afterwards, like this crazy lady approached us and was, all acting like this for no reason. And, like they hadn't done. And I'm like, I'm not getting entrapped. So again, kind of same scenario. They're trying to draw you into a behavior, right? That you don't do anymore. So, you're not going to play that game,
What a
right?
great archetype for life. In the Matrix.
Yeah. Yes, it really is. That's
because
really how. Can we pull you in? Can we piss you off? Can we,
Like, what if the objective is just to love in all situations, and then we're putting these impossible seeming situations to possibly come out? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's where it gets harder. But
yeah,
it's the most rewarding too when you can do it. So it's like
well, that's where I say I don't know if it's love in every situation. You're you're just a big old ball of love, Shane. You really are.
But
You're
love is
just a big
sometimes
old ball of love. But
right. Sometimes
yeah.
love is firm, though. I'm not saying that it's
Oh no,
you know
it is. You have to love yourself first,
right
and drawing a line in the sand with some people is necessary,
right
but yeah, but it's wasted energy, to get irate with them. Like, so anyways, we'll get back to the dream, but so that was my feeling. And that's why, and then I'm like, not going to do it. Right. I'm like, I'll go about this another way. So they were like going into the front door. They were going to go into this restaurant, right, and continue on with. They had dates that showed up, and they had these girls that were really like, meek. Like it's like they knew that what these guys doing, the behavior was bad, but they wanted to have their like nice date and carry on. So they were just like not making eye contact, just pretend that we didn't see anything. And so I'm like, okay. So my idea was, I just won't deal with them at all, right? It's I just go to the owner of the property, say, listen, hey, I was injured on your property or attacked on your property. Can you call the police, please? Right? Like, just simply come, like, it just, and then leave it with him, because it's now his property. It's his somebody got attacked on his property, so there you go. You can do it. I'm on my way. Right. You'll deal with the thugs, because I don't need to. Right. I don't need to put myself in that situation any more than I have, and just carried on my way. So it's kind of, there's an interesting juxtaposition. It's not like we have to. The one situation, I think I was under a very direct physical attack that was immediate. Person's on me, literally. So the reaction was interesting. But this, the other example was, kind of an interesting navigation of the situation and observation of it. And, I just didn't, the guy threw the snowball. I didn't have to disintegrate the, basically nuclear bomb the entire scene of my dream. I just went about it in a different way. But both to have the physical sensation in the exact same spot is another connection with that, I thought was interesting. Yeah. So I wanted to share those with you guys.
It makes me wonder if there was something like like an activation and you felt it there. And sometimes, how like you can be laying a certain way and your arm's hurting, so you'll have a dream about how your arm's being injured or something. I'm wondering if you felt some sensations or activations, and then your brain came up with a story to go along. You know what I mean? Or something like that.
I think this is third eye discernment activation. I think it's a heightened level of discernment that's being activated, in our third eye. That, and I think it will allow us to see the bully for what he is, and not be drawn in. Like, I see you trying to manipulate me, and it's just becoming so obvious, out on the world stage, and it's all tied to that. I think we did receive a new level of discernment with the third eye. So, and this is where the litmus tests come in. I feel like, we get these waves, we get this, could be, new technology or new downloads, and then they're kind of, it's a little check to see, okay, well, how you're processing it, how you're reacting, and it plays scenarios out in dreams.
Right. So you think, we were talking about like maybe UFOs or ships going around, and they're like I don't know, not like these benevolent angelic beings, but maybe just like gamekeepers, or how are you were talking?
I describe them more as like, they're more scientific, but I feel like, okay, this is where we'll get into sound like a crazy person, but that's okay. Because I've been taken up on the ship and run through tests, and it has a similar experience. Like, I was literally levitated, like pulled up and pulled into it. And I feel like they run different tests to see how we respond to different situations. So they know how we're progressing through this, and it's kind of like soil samples. Right. So, I mean, is the scientist taking soil samples? Like, I don't get the sense that they're like higher dimensional, your beings, from home necessarily, but there's nothing bad about it. Like, they're good. Like they're good. They're helping the process. They just want to monitor, you know, how we're doing and make sure, do we need, maybe, because maybe we do need a little bit more assistance, you know, how's this one progressing over here? Well, you know, look at what needs to be worked on and how we respond to it. And I think it's how they're gauging this whole process is by how we respond to stuff. And it's easy for them to go in when we're sleeping and maybe put us in a bunch of different environments, you know, in that kind of dream reality, and watch how we react and play things out,
So would
and
this be
how we
like
make our choices.
the keepers of the garden that Dolores Cannon talks about, or would
No,
it be
I don't
different
think
than that?
so.
Oh, okay.
Not for me. No, they're not keepers. I don't feel like. They're just monitoring. They're just like one aspect of, at one level. Like, I feel like the ship, I can see it. It's often described the same. You know, it's got boxy elements to it and pieces coming off of it, and it's you know, it is kind of really, really, really large UFO shape. You know that, but with boxy pieces and things off of it.
Right.
And I just feel like it just maybe there's more than one, you know, but they sample how we're doing. And you know,
That's
an
cool.
easy way is just running through different kind of tests. So you might not even like have the dream like that you're on a UFO, or they don't need, it's like, I don't, it might be represented in a different way, but typically there's some kind of portal experience, either walking through a door, going through a window, being pulled through a wall. Could be a sense of vibration or a sense of pulling, or maybe out of body experience with it, but not necessarily. And of course we don't always remember everything, right? So I think a lot of the tests we don't actually remember, but some of the big ones we do. Often the real big fear tests we do. It's, you know, how you respond, fight, flight, or actually where we're at next is, I think, a whole different level of it, you know, in the observation of a situation and a judgment on it, and how we're choosing to act or navigate in that situation is at another level.
Right. And that kind
Mm-hmm.
of gets back to the life review thing we were talking about.
Yeah, because we're
Studying.
able to see multiple perspectives.
Yeah.
It hurts at first while we're experiencing all these additional perspectives over the whole, you know, the course of our life, and viewing things from angles we may not have viewed it from before, and going,
Right.
you know, um,
And
but
it's
yeah,
part of awareness expanding. Do you know what I mean? You were
yeah,
becoming more aware of what the heck's going on. So, you
yeah.
know, and it's going to be painful as we cringe. You're like, oh, gosh. You know,
Mm.
it's kind of like, I don't know, you've been in your car, you don't realize how dirty it is. And you get out and you're like, oh,
Ooh,
it's a mess.
yeah,
Right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So it's wild stuff. So Christmas is coming up, the end of the year. What was your highlight of this year, or any final end of 22 comments or anything? I'd say probably my biggest thing was the whole Freedom Convoy thing that started in Canada. That was beautiful, and then they, which was actually kind of a year. That was actually a year
Almost
ago. It
January,
was like,
February. We're almost there.
yeah,
Amazing.
and actually, you know, to top off my year, I'm gonna go spend time with Daryl and Pam, the truck drivers or whatever, to
Mm-hmm.
finish off the year and celebrate the new year
Awesome.
with them. So it's like, and that really was a highlight of this year for me, is being a part of that whole movement, you know, and
Yeah.
all the connections that were made, and that was really fun. So yeah, a lot of people waking up, a lot of, you know, tough times too for people, you know.
Yeah.
But all in all, I'd say we're definitely making progress. No matter how chaotic it looks,
Yeah.
we're making it. It's
Yeah.
happening.
One day at a time, each moment and now at a time. And, you know, it often is 2 steps forward and 1 step back, and sometimes 3 steps back, but you know, the progress is there. And it's not so much steps back as it's just digging into deeper levels of ourselves. I think that's really the better way to look at it. You know, so when we kind of fall back into these sort of, you know, stages of shadow work, right? And dealing with, you know, the darker side of emotions and things we may or may done, like all of that. Yeah. Sorry, I just lost it. I told you that was going to happen at some point, right?
It's all good. We were just kind of wrapping things up anyways. Any New Year
Yeah.
plans or holiday plans? Anything exciting
We
to
haven't
talk
even put up a tree. No tree here. Um, yeah. It's no expectations. That's the other thing. I will just say this quickly, like along with sort of this feeling of limbo as far as like, okay, like, well, I really want to know what the rules are. It's I can't envision like I used to future. Um, my mind doesn't want to settle on anything that it used to, as far as like dreams for how I, wish for manifestation. Like I can't even settle on anything. So, I don't know if that's an experience that anybody else is having, but I think it really is. It's like you can't unplug into anything in the past, and I can't plug into anything in the future either. And I do find I'm not able to manifest in my imagination future the same way that I used to. Anything it wants to start to put a picture together for, it just collapses. It's not immersive like it used to be. So just, yeah, a real difference. So it really leaves you in this space. It's like, well, it's hard to know how to build for the future now. There's something really different. So I'm kind of waiting for the rest, a bit more information to come along. And I think that's what the next stage is going into for the new year, as far as my expectations into the new year, is sort of a lot of this condensing and clearing away of the past patterns. And my big question being, I kind of want to know a little bit more what's really going on here before I make any more moves forward.
I can tell you what's going on for Christmas dinner. It looks like you got a great big turkey dinner ahead of you.
Turkey, so. Yes. Yeah, we got turkey dinner. We're just going to, that's all that matters.
Yeah, that's it. It's like, the analogy of the headlights in the car at night, and you only need to see just in front of you. You know what I mean? You don't need the whole highway lit up. So.
No, that's
and
it.
And to be okay with that.
I won't do that anymore. It doesn't want that. Mm-hmm.
Right. And you can be okay with that. Because it's like, you can still not have expectations, but expect good things, like not be specific about it, but be more, like how good can it get, like Cynthia says, or just to be in that, exciting, childlike surprise. Like, I know it's going to be good. It's beyond what I can even imagine, right? So it's kind of moving into that place, isn't it?
And I think that really is it, is that anything I can envision feels limited. I feel like I'm limiting myself if I create any specific picture, right. Because it precludes what is actually really possible.
Right.
Yeah. That's exactly it.
And we're trying to view it from our limited, position.
Yeah, exactly. So,
realm,
and I know it's limited.
Right.
I know it's limited. So I'm resistant to creating that picture because I don't have all the information.
Right. And is what we're even talking about going to be created from within this realm, or, is it going to transform
I'm just
so
gonna,
much? It's,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm just going to hold my cards for a little bit. I'm just going to, keep it to myself for a little bit and see what happens. Yeah,
I feel you. Yep. Just kind of observe and watch the show,
Yeah.
And
it is entertaining.
And we do realize as we move forward that it's like, there's always stuff about ourselves we can work on. So it's not like we're done. Like,
it's never ending pit.
Finally, I'm done with that.
Oh, I'm done. Yeah, did that shadow work?
Right.
Oh, I love that. I always get a tickle out of that. It was like, oh yeah, I went through my dark night of the soul and came out the other side. I'm like, get ready for round 2.
The I am discourse, though.
Over.
The I am discourse really helped me not to like sink below a certain level, to realize if I do, it's just completely my responsibility, because at the end of the day, we decide how our experience is going to go, despite whatever the external stuff is, So if you guys haven't checked out the I Am Discourse playlist, I'm revisiting it, and it's so helpful. It's a great reminder. It's like one of those things you can revisit all the time. So if you have already checked it out, you might want to check it out again. But it's pretty cool.
And you'll probably hear exactly what you need to hear at that time that you need to hear it.
Yeah,
right?
It's amazing.
Yeah, even though you may have heard it before, it's just funny how, you go to play something like that and it'll give you that thing that applies to what you're
Yeah.
going through.
Or like I noticed some things that I didn't notice the first time around that I'm doing now, and I'm like, wait, is it because I heard that? Because I don't think I quite grasped it before when I heard it. You know what I mean? But now it makes
Right.
sense. So
That's
more of it
right.
made sense as I went back and revisited it too. So
Right, because you see how these ideas actually change how you respond to your life and situations
yeah, absolutely.
naturally. So you do move into just doing those things, and you're like, oh,
Right.
yeah,
It's all
yeah, because
connected
it's
to remembering our
progression.
sovereignty. You know.
That's right, and your authenticity.
Absolutely. Who we really
Amen.
are. Amen.
Yeah.
Well, lots of
Amen.
love, light, and unity, you guys. We'll see you next year. And
Yeah.
have a
Holy
Merry
smokes.
Christmas. And if the world doesn't end tomorrow, because it is going to be 12/21, and I know that at least that's always predicted pretty much. So, we'll see. If we make it past that, though, have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and we'll
Yeah.
be back here
Yeah.
chatting
And we'll
with you.
see you
Talking
again.
shift in 23.
Yes. As another whirlwind year goes by, it's even faster than the last one.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Lots of love, you guys. We'll see you later. Peace.
Peace.